I hear a lot of people on Reddit and in YouTube comments mentioning the prices of video games and retro games and how they're going up. I'm always hearing it's getting more expensive. Everything just keeps going up and up and up. That's the main idea I hear from these types of comments. However, I'm always tempered in that regard because I do look at game prices a lot, and I look at long-term patterns. I've done it a lot on this channel, and I have just a different view of things altogether. Retro video game prices are not constantly going up like this, you know, if you put it on a chart. There's ups and downs, but there's a lot of valleys, and there's a lot of flatlining. I've been looking at trends ever since the pandemic. There's just a lot of prices that don't move at all. Just to prove my point, what I did today is made a huge examination of the overall price of games for each of the main systems that are out there. When I say main, I'm just talking about some of the bigger players, Nintendo, Sega, Atari, and so forth. And I did some of the other companies like Intellivision and stuff like that. In the end, I selected 33 game systems. Do not be offended if your favorite system is not discussed today. 33 is a lot to go through. After hearing the trends for these 33, you will have a good idea of what's going on in the retro gaming pricing market. And I just want to stick in, I am not a person who buys and sells video games. I mostly just buy them, and I don't even buy that many anymore. I would rather not talk about pricing at all when it comes to these games. I'd rather just be playing them. But unfortunately, you know, when I walk into a store and I see games behind glass and stuff, pricing is part of my world, you know. I am not a big fan of investors coming and buying and selling games and having them encased in plastic and selling them for outrageous prices. But I do accept that pricing is part of my world, and I will get you all caught up on it. So what I used was price charting. It is a website. Every time I speak about it, I feel like I'm advertising for them. It is free to use. Most of it's free. There are these paid tiers where you can get extra features. I've never paid for those. They have never paid me to promote them or anything like that. This is just like a central place that keeps track of how much things are selling on eBay. Its main method for figuring out game prices is by looking at sold listings on eBay. I know that can be problematic in itself, and I'm sure there's other sites that do it, but this is one of the most well-known sites, and it's a site that a lot of video game stores, at least where I live, they use the prices from this website. So the prices I do talk about are important, and they're gonna be reflected in some of the shops when you go out, or at least that's been the case for me. It keeps track of everything that's ever been sold on eBay pretty much. And it keeps track of it on a daily basis, and it keeps longitudinal data. To make a long story short, I have the ability to compare 2 points in time. The 2 points I chose are March 2022 and March 2024, which is the time of this video. I just chose a 2-year span because I think over 2 years that gives you an idea of whether or not something's going up or something's going down. I think if it was only 1 year, it wouldn't be as instructive because it's more susceptible to sudden peaks. If I go further than 2 years, then I have to start including like some of the pandemic era pricing, and things got a little wild during the pandemic in the pricing of certain video games and stuff like that. So let's dive into the first group, and these are Atari console games. So we'll start with the Atari 2600. The average price of a Atari 2600 cartridge in March 2022 was $28. Now in March 2024, it is $34. By the way, for any cartridge-based systems I talk about today, it is giving me the average for loose games and not some rare variant, you know, one with 6 screws or something. Those are supposed to not be included in this pricing. So we're talking about just in the Atari 2600 alone, I could be talking about 500,000 data points. Maybe it's not that many, maybe it's 50,000, I don't know, but it's a lot of data points. If there's one game on the Atari 2600 that's rising, it's probably not gonna raise up all the others. Indeed though, the Atari 2600 has risen a little bit during that period. I mean, if we're talking about cartridges going up $6, there seems to be interest in the Atari 2600 right now. All right, so we have 32 more to go. Do not fall asleep. I'm gonna start yelling at the camera if you start falling asleep. So the Atari 5200, March 2022 price was 26 bucks, and March 2024 is 26 bucks. So it has not changed at all. Atari 7800, it went from 39 bucks to 45. It went up $6. Just like the 2600. I'll toss the Jaguar in there, even though there's not as many Jaguar games being sold, so whatever. It went from 71 to 71, so that is flat. 71's still expensive, it's just not moving either direction. It's kind of frozen in time. Okay, so let's just jump over to some other old consoles. Let's do Intellivision. It went from 28 to 26, and that's a drop of $2. So that might just be statistical noise, or you know, it might just mean there's a waning interest in Intellivision cartridges out there. ColecoVision went from 41 to 45. That's a growth of $4. Odyssey 2 went from 17 to 16. That's -1. Let's jump over to some Sega systems. Master System went from 31 to 28. So it went down 3. Genesis went from 22 to 18, and that's -4. Now, that surprises me because it seems like Genesis games have been rising slowly over time, but remember, we're talking about loose cartridges. I don't think there is as big a market for the loose Sega Genesis cartridges. I think collectors like me go for the ones in case, and I do not think that price charting provides me with the average data for the ones in case, or complete in box is what I mean to say. But anyway, it still indicates a drop of -4 for Genesis. Sega CD went from 54 to 42. That is a drop of $12. So I do believe there is a decrease in interest in Sega CD games. If you want to buy them, maybe now is the best time to do that. And I will say that for discs, I believe it is counting complete in box because it no longer has the text that says loose games when it comes to CD-based games. Still with me? Let's do Sega Saturn. It went from 41 to 40, not much change there. The Dreamcast went from 27 to 24. That's a drop of $3. That's good news for me because I collect Dreamcast. TurboGrafx. I assume that these prices do not include the PC Engine. I don't really know, but it went from 118 to 113. That's a drop of $5. Turbo CD, 195 to 189. That's a -6. Neo Geo AES went from 1214 to 850. That's a -364. It could be that those kind of games do not sell that often, so it's susceptible to ups and downs, but it is a pretty big drop. The Neo Geo MVS, 153 to 170. That's a gain of 17. Let's look at the PS1. It went from 16 to 15. Once again, this is a 2-year period. That went down $1. PS2 went from 13 to 13. That's flat. PS3 went from 14 to 14. That is flat. I did not go any further because to me, PS4 and PS5 are kind of still modern games and they're still in production. So I don't trust pricing trends of games that are still in production because, you know, it gets sold new at a high price and then it suddenly drops a few weeks later or whatever. So if I make future videos like this, I will include those systems. That goes for Xbox as well. I'm only doing the original Xbox and the 360. The original Xbox went from 8 to 9. Xbox 360 went from 9 to 11. That went up. So a little bit of action there, it looks like. So the rest of my listings here will be Nintendo systems. The NES went from 46 to 41. That's a -5. The SNES went from 38 to 44. That's a rise of 6. Okay, for N64, I am not going to include it today because when I look at Price Charting's graph for it, it does not look right. It looks like a meteor hit the graph and caused this big crater rather recently in the past few years. It just has a pattern to it that is unlike any of the patterns of any of the other game systems. Like I said, I've been looking at these graphs over a number of years. I think there was some kind of data error that snuck into the N64 data and was there for a few years or something before people noticed it. And then they made some kind of correction because the graph seemed to go right back in the spot where it needed to be. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I chose not to cover it in this video because it might make it look like there's a sudden rise or a sudden shrinking of the two data points, and I just do not trust it. But anyway, let's get to the GameCube. It went from 32 to 33, a gain of $1. The Wii went from 10 to 10, 0 difference. Wii U went from 19 to 19, once again, no difference. There doesn't seem to be that much interest in the Wii and Wii U right now. Maybe in the future there'll be a wave of nostalgia. But let's step into the Nintendo handhelds. The Game Boy went from 26 to 25. The Game Boy Color went from 18 to 19. The Game Boy Advance went from 16 to 17. The DS went from 11 to 12. So far, it's just a buck here, a buck there, you know, nothing major. The 3DS went from 19 to 24, so that's substantial, a rise of $5. And Virtual Boy, I don't think there's a lot of these that get sold, but it went from 128 to 105. That's a loss of 23. So what is my takeaway from all this data? I believe that retro gaming prices are frozen in time. For the most part, they have stayed the same over this 2-year period. You just saw that. It's possible that piracy, emulation, and all the different ways of playing these games have settled the market down. There's not big waves of people going out to grab a certain system anymore. I think things have settled down, which is pretty good. If you're someone that collects these games, you can still get some affordable ones. It just depends on which ones. Some of them it might be too late to collect for, but if not, there's other ways to acquire those games and enjoy them. What do you guys think? Does that contradict what you see with your own eyes? I know there's some people that will say, well, this one game used to go for 40 and now it goes for 80. But like I said, that is not enough to bring up the entire price, average price of those games, usually. I think in order to make it rise, it would have to be a common game that suddenly has a rise in interest. So it's hard to move the average game price. It takes a lot of action. So maybe the ones that did rise 5 is a more significant movement than I'm making it out to be. But just let me know what you think of these trends and let me know what you see with your own eyes, and watch one of these videos that's on the screen right now if you can. There's some beautiful stuff there, beautiful videos. I'll see you next time.